So I think we are live here. We just gotta go live there. Any second now. There we go. All right. Welcome everyone to Microsoft Unboxed. This is the podcast for the same website. We're in episode 9. We've made 9 of these bad boys. I had to take last week off because I had a chance to go do the Super Bowl and I took it. Um, my team lost, but it was still an experience I had to have. Thank you, everybody, for coming back and hanging out with us for more Microsoft news following the break. It was a kind of a slow week, but there was some news. Microsoft had teased something last week about big news for Xbox, and then they'll tell you how big of news that is towards the end of this podcast. We're going to be talking about NVIDIA bringing a chatbot to the PC. Uh, Microsoft figured out a way for its Edge browser to stop copying Chrome in so many ways. We're also going to be discussing how Google is going to go after Windows 10 users, which there is a large pot of users. So we'll see what tools they have next to kind of sway some people. Then we'll be talking about a app that I never used but always downloaded because it came with Office. Microsoft Publisher will be ending, and we'll tell you what that means for you, 6 or 7 people who actually do use it. And the last thing, like I said, we'll be talking about the big news, which is Xbox news, towards the end of the pod. So to get us started, I didn't even introduce you. I apologize. Who's my co-host today? Huh? Let people know.
David's over here. I got on Threads a couple weeks ago, and you've already forgot about me. So there's nothing there's nothing to tease me over. So I guess hey, it's all right.
Fair enough. I apologize. Yes, it's David and Kareem today, as usual. Would you want to start us off, David? I know this is your story you brought to the table.
Sure. Basically, folks, we've got another advancement in AI this week. I'm sure everybody is totally surprised by that with all the AI news that we've been seeing over the last 18 months. But we got something a little bit different this time, and I think it's pretty neat. I have had a chance to roughly tinker with it for a few hours, and I think there's a lot of promise there. And NVIDIA is bringing this to the table. They have introduced a chat bot that you can install on your computer. Now, there are a couple gotchas on this deal. Remember, AI uses your graphics card for speed of processing. So you've got to have a 3060 or higher graphics card with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, when you first read that, that's going to eliminate a lot of the 3060 and even some of the 4060 laptops out there because those are sitting right at that 6 gig of video RAM, mark. So beware. You've got to have somewhat of a current machine. But long story short, so you guys can understand, you can basically set this chatbot up and point it at folders on your PC, your documents folders, your picture folders, your text documents, PDFs, your Word documents, your XML files, and then you can query the bot for information about those files, and it will return a result. So far for me, at the limited folder that I pointed it at, it would do a fantastic job of searching my Microsoft Word documents, my PDFs, my text files. I've not had a chance to throw in a good XML file to it yet, but I have been relatively pleased with the response that I have seen. Now, this could lead to larger language models. In fact, you can use this particular bot to connect your content to some other larger language models should you choose to. Now, be aware of your privacy concerns there. That stuff has not been completely fleshed out as to what's private and what's not yet. And the chatbot, it's called Chat RTX. They really dug into the creative bucket here to come up with this name. It's Chat RTX. Is available for download, and there's a link in the article on our website, and you can go check that out. I recommend somebody do it. I think this is just the start of what we're going to see of the local language models being put on our computers so we can use these language models on our own files. Now, I'll end with this. There's also that security aspect of, these bots, what I'm going to call them, these language models have got to scan your files to answer your queries. Is that something you're comfortable with? Because we don't really know what's always being done with our data. So keep that in mind before you download it and use it.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to this. I will try it out because I use a Surface Studio, and I think I have the specs for it. So I want to see what this is like and see if this will be kind of a test bed for what they're going to be doing when they eventually uh, burrow some AI into on-device OS level functions for Windows, because I know that's supposed to be coming. That's Microsoft's promise. So the way that this functions seems like it's kind of a precursor to that. So for those of you who maybe want to know, get a look and feel, this might be the tool for you.
Well, this on device stuff is coming sooner than later. We've already seen, a lot of our early devices of 2024 have got the NPUs already in them that is supposed to be used for a lot of this on device type queries. We've just not seen what developers and Microsoft are going to allow people to do with that just yet.
Correct. We're going to go on to our next story, which is Edge stops copying Chrome. This was a bit of a controversy last week. Um, was it last week? I mean, it's been going on for actually a little bit, but it was discovered last week. It made headlines. I believe our buddy Tom Warren over at The Verge kind of got some of the dust kicked up about this. But essentially, what was happening was is that people were getting uh, their pages, favorites, their whole setup copied over from Chrome if they were using Chrome on a Windows device when they opened up Edge immediately. So it was never the prompted situation that you normally get when you're importing or exporting data from one browser to the other. This was just an automatic kind of thing. People were having issues with that. I think you and I spoke off mic. I personally didn't have an issue with it. I always found the Venn diagram of people who use Chrome and Edge to that extent very small crossover. But nonetheless, I think what I had missed in my dismissal of this was the data copying concerns that people were having. And those were to a fair extent, if you're using Chrome for business and Edge for personal, or vice versa, there is a bit of that overlap where you don't want necessarily that information to be shared in different browsers. So Microsoft launched this update for Edge browser. I think for those of you who experienced this, who or maybe were concerned about this, you're going to want to look for version 121 .0.2277.128. It's now available in the stable channel. It should be going out to more devices. I believe it began rolling out yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, late yesterday. The update aims to correct faults within the data import features, a mechanism designed to seamlessly transfer user data, such as open tabs, favorites, and other information from browsers like Chrome, Firefox, straight to Edge. Um, but again, that was following the user's authorization. Now, like we said, there were concerns over unauthorized data access. The rollout of the latest Edge update coincides with allegations against the browser for improperly procuring data from competing browsers without users' consent. I don't know if this was extended to Firefox. I don't use Firefox. I don't use Opera, but it seems like a lot of the comments in Reddit or online Twitter/X or whatnot in threads was about Chrome in specific. So uh, Microsoft has now patched that. They released the version for it. So if you want to, you can head over to, I believe, the Microsoft Store, update your Edge browser through that. If it doesn't automatically do it, there should be an update little icon at the top left of your browser window um, to update. So, what were your thoughts on this in general?
Naughty, naughty Microsoft. That's kind of the way I feel about that. I'm a cross browser user. I did not personally experienced this bug, but I do have certain things in Chrome that I don't have in Edge and vice versa, and I would prefer that those things not cross so I can totally understand where people were upset, because there are a lot of people in this work from home world and even people using business laptops that maybe their employer installs Edge, for example, and says, hey, this one's for business. So maybe they go in behind and put Chrome on there for, their personal stuff if they're allowed to. And when they open up Edge, everything just kind of copies over and syncs. You know, somebody's boss out there probably saw something that they didn't want, that the employer didn't want the boss to see. So I can totally understand that. And I don't support any company doing this without, as you said, prompt the user, give the user the choice of what they want to do. When companies start assuming, as we saw here, customers, users get upset.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And furthermore, I believe Microsoft's lack of transparency on this entire situation
Yes.
is probably more upsetting. Again, a mistake happens, coding happens. You go to fix something and you inadvertently trigger something else. I get that. I understand development cycles and how long these things can take to get fixed. I totally get that. You don't have to give a timeline or a date, but you do, I think, as a business, have to acknowledge it, especially when it's something as important as a browser on a device. I mean, we are becoming more browser based. Uh, more browser based computing society, and so I know you're trying to gain market share. You're trying to fix things and make your browser more competitive, but you at least have to acknowledge that. And Microsoft has to, I believe, to this date, even though they've released this. Well, we're doing all the PR for them. They have not, I don't believe, acknowledged this, saying, "Hey, this is an issue. We're sorry. We're working on a fix. It'll be out soon." They have just quietly pushed this out and quietly let it kind of roll as it has. So uh, that's not good. Microsoft, you can do better.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see Microsoft make this move. I'm not going to say it's out of character. They've done, things before, but come on, Microsoft. As you said, do better.
Let's talk about our next one. Otherwise, if Microsoft, you're not doing better, this could happen to you.
Yeah, this could happen. Your users could go to Chrome OS Flex, and before the laughter in the background starts, there's a reason that Chrome OS Flex is being talked about. And I will mention right off the get go that I have put Chrome OS Flex on an older machine, and you know, it does do what it's designed to do. It brings life to those older machines. So let's jump right in. Windows 10 support ends in 2025, and Microsoft is offering a paid extended support to individuals and organizations who can't afford it. You can continue to use Windows 10 after that with an extended support license, and they will continue with critical updates. But otherwise, 2025 Windows 10 is going bye bye. So you better go update to Windows 11. Now, if your device can't, this is where Chrome OS Flex can jump right in. Long story short, you set up a USB drive. You need a USB stick to do this. You download Chrome OS Flex, put it on your USB stick, boot your machine from the USB stick with Chrome OS Flex, and you will basically be presented with a short, quick installer. It will connect to your Google account because Chrome OS Flex is Google's operating system, and it will turn your older laptops, desktops, or non compatible PCs that are not compatible with Windows 11 or the upcoming Windows 12 into somewhat like Chromebooks. I mean, that's essentially what you're getting is a Chromebook without having to go out and buy the hardware. I have put it on a machine that is roughly 5 years old. Just a little Celeron CPU, 8 gigs of RAM. Runs well. All the hardware works, the Wi-Fi works, the sound works, the Ethernet works. So if you're looking a easy way to add a little life to your aging PC and you just don't want to go buy a new one, Chrome OS Flex is a good option. Chrome OS Flex is free, so there's not anything to pay for that. They are giving you that right out of the get go. And we do see that Microsoft has patched or is no longer allowing some of the workarounds for the CPU requirements for Windows 11 and upcoming Windows 12. So, until somebody finds another way around or you go buy new hardware, Chrome OS Flex is a pretty good option.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. It's for, I would assume, the computer savvy, enough people
Yeah, you need to be a
who
little savvy to do this.
might eventually upgrade their devices anyway. It's because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about uh, running and operating an entirely different new operating system. As much as Chrome OS mimics Windows in many ways, it's still a different operating system. Access to different apps, web apps, and the UI are different. So the idea of someone who being versatile enough to say, all right, my Windows 10 device is no longer functioning as I need it to. I'm just going to switch over to Chrome Flex OS. Is kind of a bit of a stretch, but it's nice that it's available for the average customer. I do believe this is more of a fleet thing for schools necessarily.
Right now,
Uh,
yes.
this allow this allows schools who don't necessarily want to reinvest in inexpensive Chromebooks, another $300-400, to get a $6 USB stick from Rite Aid and load up an entire fleet of old PCs with the new operating system, and maybe switch over to Google Workspaces or whatever the school performance thing is, and already use that sunk investment and save money. So I'm all for it. I'm not a huge fan of Chrome OS. It's not bad. I think it's a pretty good operating system. But if it's going to save schools money, especially when our government aren't funding schools like they should be, or teachers, I'm all for this as a solution. Microsoft, if you can figure out a way to combat that, I'm all for competition as well.
Well, I'm gonna throw one thing in there. I think Microsoft did or does. I kind of say it that way for a reason because I don't know how much of this is still going on. They do have the watered down. I don't cannot remember the name of the product, but there is a Surface product for school.
Hmm.
It is that is meant to compete with Chromebooks. It's a very watered down PC with a basic version of Windows on it, and from what I've seen, that doesn't sell very well. One, because it
No,
is so watered down. First of all, I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. So if somebody watches the podcast here, drop it down in the comments. It's the
you're
Surface
not talking about
something.
Windows 10s, are you?
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's like a 12-inch machine with a baseline Pentium Gold CPU, 4 gigs of RAM or something like that. And it's just not as capable as a Chromebook. I mean, Lenovo recently sent us a Chromebook Plus, and that's not a bad machine. Now, it's not school priced, but the OS itself, not bad. It is a little improved from what Chrome OS used to be.
I mean, Windows 10s is not bad at all. It's the difference between having access to x86 apps and not. So, if you're a school that can run, I believe, the updated version of Microsoft's like classroom software and services, like OneNote and uh, OneDrive from the browser and things like that, Windows 10s is actually pretty good. The problem is that there's no way to kick a failing Windows 10 machine into Windows 10s. So again, they have a competing operating system, but you have to get new hardware for it. That is the issue where this kind of provides that. So if they're able to sell maybe just a Windows 10s USB stick to convert these Windows 10 devices that people might have at schools into a smoother running machine that just uses Windows 10s, that is a more one-to-one solution than saying, oh, well, if you don't mind it, go buy another $300 laptop that has a more stripped down version of the operating system you were just using if you want a better experience versus, saying, hey, here's a USB stick, pop this in, and we're good to go again. So, uh, like I said, Microsoft, you need to figure out a way to either make Windows 10 run better on these old devices longer, or a way to get Windows 10s onto these devices where people don't have to go out and purchase a new one. With that being said, we won't harp on that too much because, like I said, unless we're working in schools or maybe offices who can't really afford to upgrade an entire, you know, suite of people, this is, I doubt, going to get any mainstream attention from most people. So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the end of life for Microsoft Publisher. And if you're scratching your head about that, I was as well, because
Been a long
um,
time.
right, exactly. I was kind of like, what is going on with this one? But it looks like Microsoft has called the end of Publisher. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily know what Publisher is, it was the other app, the fourth app that came bundled in Office. Usually, we know the big three, which is PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. For most people, Publisher was one of the offshoots. It was the green and white one that always came. You didn't necessarily install it all the time, but for those of you who are curious, you would every now and then and realize it looked like Word, but didn't necessarily operate like Word. What it was basically a bunch of templates for creating a bunch of media, as far as like billboards or flyers or banners, things like that. It wasn't a full-on designer kit, but it served the purpose for a very long time for a lot of people. But Microsoft has officially declared that it's intended to discontinue Microsoft Publisher, um, and they plan to do so by October 2026. So you got about 2 years to get all your publishing needs taken care of. Going forward, I know you're wondering, for those six, seven, eight of you who still use Publisher, what's going to happen. They've been slowly building on many of the features into other parts of their productivity suite. One of them being, I believe, in OneNote, or not OneNote. Yeah, not OneNote. PowerPoint. There's a lot more design features for those of you who are using that and kind of play around with those. They're also going to be building it into
Microsoft
Word,
Designer.
Microsoft Designer as well. There are a lot of features in Microsoft Designer that borrow from this as well. So again, by October 2026, you'll need to have a plan B going forward. And Microsoft is also listening to user feedback. And again, I think they're going to take the next 2 years to kind of take each one of those features, tweak it a little bit, make it more modern, make it faster, and bury it in one of its many other Office suites that makes more sense at the time, more applicable than that. Like I said, as you mentioned, probably look to Microsoft Designer going forward if you're going to be doing any of those kind of creative works for marketing or whatnot.
You know, this I'm that person that goes back to Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows Millennium. When you would go into your Best Buys, your Babbage's computer stores, if anybody remembers those back in the day, where you would see that Microsoft box on the shelf, and they'd have the little publisher icon over there. And this goes all the way back to your dot matrix printers when we would all buy the computer paper in the box. We'd print the banners out. It was a big thing to print a colored banner, but I can kind of understand why Microsoft is discontinuing this product to some degree, because even we were just talking about education. You don't send home newsletters. You don't send home the attractive documents like you used to with your student in their backpack. A lot of things are done online now. Classes have websites, schools have websites, parents are communicated with through SMS messaging and emails. So I kind of get, I've got a printer over here in the corner that's just a basic Epson printer. I think I've printed 50 pages out on it in the last 6 months. So we're just not consuming paper products and using that type of medium for design and communication anymore. So I can kind of understand Microsoft's, hey, maybe it is time to get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, like like to your point, is people have I think have moved on to more robust web apps that do this kind of stuff, like Canva, I believe, is one, and
Yep.
uh, they also use they're using their phones and mobile apps to kind of create this stuff, or Adobe. I think Adobe's taken a lot of work from this, so to keep pouring resources into it specifically. Probably makes less sense. I think that probably, out of the plethora of solutions that publisher does have within its own app, I'm sure maybe only a handful of them are getting used. I mean, Microsoft has been known as the telemetry company, so I'm sure they have data saying like, hey, of the 300 different features that we have here, 6 to 8 of them are getting used, 80 to 90%. Let's move those over to the other application suites that make more sense for it and dissolve this entire thing instead of, updating it every year or whenever we do a new update and, it not getting the attention that it needs.
I agree.
We got, what is our next one? I think it's going to be pretty much the biggest news that we had this week. You want to let people know what we're talking about?
Well, yep, Microsoft. Here I go. Xbox has made some changes, folks, and it's going to could be a big deal. I think right now, we're exploring something, and I'm gonna leave a spot here for my buddy Kareem to jump in. But Microsoft is exploring the idea of sharing what used to be some Microsoft exclusive titles with other platforms. I know I've got a little bit of an opinion on this, a little bit of an opinion of where we're headed. Good idea, bad idea, but I will kind of let it segue into Kareem's thoughts and kind of, let him add a little detail and see how he feels about what Microsoft announced this week. I think gaming is getting ready to make a left hand turn or right hand turn, depending on which direction you want to go. We're going to make a little turn here and game a little differently. I think depending on the success of what Microsoft is trying to do here.
Yeah, we wrote about this. I believe yesterday was the
Yes.
breaking news. Again, Microsoft Xbox division kind of teased this last going into the weekend, saying like, "Hey, we got some big news for everybody." And I believe they said this in part because rumors have started coming out about this. People were already online saying, "Hey, we think Microsoft's about to do something unprecedented, and they're about to add their games to competing platforms." And the rumor went wild. They started picking some of the biggest names, some future games like Indiana Jones, I believe, was one of the ones that were coming out. They were talking about the most recent Starfield because it's been big for them, and people have been kind of itching to see what the fanboys would do if Starfield made it to PlayStation or whatnot. Anyway, they teased it. They finally came out with the news. They had, I believe it was live on Xbox Podcast, where you can go watch the video now if you wanted to or listen to it. But they had, I believe it was CEO uh,
Phil
Bill
Spencer.
Spencer, President Sarah Bond, and I forget who the last gentleman was. But they sat around talking, and in conjunction with this explanation, with this, I believe it was like 30 minutes video or not, they also had a bunch of interviews. And The Verge did, they've been doing some amazing reporting over there. I would suggest you go read some of their stuff as well, because they've been able to sit down with Sarah and Phil to ask more in depth questions. But basically, the whole hoopla became that Microsoft is, in fact, officially going to start off by dipping its toe in releasing 4 games to rival platforms. They did mention Sony and Nintendo specifically. We don't know if there's going to be other ones, like maybe some other cloud-based ones internationally or whatnot. They didn't say what the 4 games were, but sources familiar with this information says that they're looking to do, I believe, I'm sure I have it right. Um, they want a community-based game and an indie type game, which led a lot of people to believe that it could be Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush. Even though I believe Power would actually take both of those if you were to just have one game. But they're gonna, Hi-Fi Rush did well for what it was, relatively speaking. And Sea of Thieves continues to be a big community draw, community based or driven gameplay. So that was the extent of it. So there, for people who were worried that this could be the end of Xbox if they start just releasing their games on it, uh, I think you were kind of walking away with the kind of sigh of relief, like, oh, it's not the biggest games, but it does leave a lot of questions open for what Microsoft plans to do. I'll let you jump in before I start giving some of the quotes from the interview, if you want to let people know what your thoughts were initially.
Well, initially, I thought there was going to be a big title. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I thought I was expecting a Starfield. Starfield or Indiana Jones was my expectation. So when they kind of give us it was kind of a letdown in the beginning when they said, "Hey, we're not going to tell you what the titles are." They were going to save that and let the June announcements between now and then take care of that, so they didn't steal the thunder from any development or anything like that. But I think this is just okay. The literal dip your toes in the water and see what happens. The only thing that I left wondering was if we're not getting a triple A or double A title. I don't consider the titles that you called out there triple A or double A titles necessarily.
How dare you? How dare you, sir? There are hundreds of pirates out there, all cursing at you.
But it kind of left me wondering, okay, what's the expectation? Is it, you know, what kind of participation, what kind of interaction is Microsoft looking for to say, hey, putting our titles on other platforms is successful? Because I noticed that Phil Spencer several times and Sarah as well kept going back to play anywhere, play anywhere. That's the core of our philosophy. We want everybody to be able to play anywhere. And I'm going to bring something else up after you speak in a minute. But I'm a fan of what's going on here. I just hope this 3 game thing isn't a fad that Microsoft says, okay, you didn't hit metric XYZ, so we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I think to your question and to what they're saying, I believe the measure of success on this is far-reaching. It's an overarching thing that's going to be several years in the making. I don't think you're going to say like, oh, only 500,000 players between PlayStation and Nintendo played Hi-Fi Rush. Let's shut it down. They've invested almost $70 billion into becoming a publisher, essentially. And this is further buttressed by the quote I believe Spencer said, that he, quote, I do have a fundamental belief that over the next 5 or 10 years, exclusive games that are exclusive to one piece of hardware, are going to be a smaller part of the game industry. To what you're saying about playing anywhere, I think Microsoft is evolving into a publisher. That is
Yes.
what they paid for. It is high margins on software, which is their bread and butter. The Xbox is a hardware thing that they do, and they do it relatively well by comparison. But the margins are razor thin, if any. Most of them are sold at costs, if not a sunk cost, to get developers and everyone in gaming a piece of the pie. They sell at a loss. They can now basically just print money by having an established studio, an established uh, platform, and a way to get games out. Because Activision knows how to get games out to devices and things like that. To just become a publisher. At the end of the day, if Sony were the only hardware device out there, or Nintendo were the only two, Microsoft could still, Activision still does well without making its own hardware, and Microsoft basically bought that business. But to that point, because that was what everyone was fearing over the weekend, was that if we start seeing this trend, Microsoft will no longer be in the hardware business. You won't have competitive consoles. You'll just have PlayStation, and you'll have Nintendo, and maybe a few other handheld gaming devices that run Xbox on them or whatnot, or Windows of some extent, and PCs. And that for those of us who are actual hardware users of the Xbox console, we'd have nowhere to go. I believe at least for another generation or a generation and a half. Sarah Bond came out and said, the end of this year, we plan to have new hardware out for everybody. So I think you and I have been talking about this. We reported this that they are due for a mid-cycle refresh. So that's at least coming. That maybe might hold people over for the next 3 to 5 years, depending on where we get with new hardware. I believe they came out yesterday, or has been reported yet late last night, early this morning, that there's going to be even greater hardware that Microsoft has in store and planned that uh, should be exciting, and people aren't expecting. It's going to be a leap in gaming performance, so to some extent. So this hardware refresh is coming up. I think we mentioned that probably start hearing about it in May, and not if not June, and then divide the new refresh versions of the Xbox Series S and X should be around in the fall with a new controller system. But I believe they're also going to introduce something or tease something later this year, maybe after sales or whatnot of those come out, saying like, hey, if in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have an even better system. So they're still going to be making hardware, but I do believe their goal at some point is to just become the Netflix of gaming, where I mean, you don't need a device for Netflix. It's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. You go to a hotel, there's Netflix on your TV. You go home, there's a Netflix app. There's a Netflix button on your controller. There's a Netflix app on your tablet. There's the Netflix app on your phone, on your laptop. It's just on any screen that you can find. There's a Netflix app, and I believe that's how they want the Xbox app to be. And that's the level of success.
Totally agree, and I'm gonna keep this as brief as possible. I have quite a few opinions, but I'm going to try to condense some of this down. What Sarah said about new hardware coming, I believe there is new hardware coming, but right before we started the pod, I do not remember what outlet it was. I had several outlets up on my screen, but there was one outlet that the title was Microsoft needs to get out of the console business. And I read that, and they weren't wrong. That they were not wrong, because what model has been successful for Microsoft before Xbox? Selling software to an OEM. Microsoft sets the standard of what your hardware has to be to run Windows. Dell, for example, HP, Lenovo, you have to meet these specs in your hardware to run Windows. We sell you a Windows license. Microsoft doesn't make that PC. And I know Phil said, we're going to be making Xbox for a long time. But what I noticed, that's what he said, a long time. What is a long time to Phil? Is that 2 generations from now? Is that 5 generations from now? When you were talking about having the Xbox button on your remote, I was looking through some Best Buy, as I always look at TVs for the Super Bowl, and see what deals are out there. And it reminded me, because I saw some for sale, that some of the Samsung TVs out there have got xCloud built into them. It was a partnership with Microsoft to go ahead and put that inside of your TV. You hit the button on your remote, it launches an app, you pair your controller to your TV, you play your game. So for now, Microsoft is going to produce Xbox. But if you noticed when Phil was speaking, he said more than once, now that we have acquired Activision, we are one of the largest software publishers out there. And they put the graphic up and showed, the Activision titles go across: Call of Duty, Overwatch, Diablo, and they did announce that Diablo is coming to Game Pass, next month, in middle of March, end of March. So, there's your first title from Activision coming to Game Pass. I don't see the long-term plan of what we've got on the screen here of a new Xbox. I see the next generation. I don't see the generation after that. We've got handhelds out there. We've got, cloud gaming that's out there. I think at some point in the next 5 years, Microsoft does what Kareem just said. They pivot to software, and somebody else makes the hardware. Because, like you said, they don't make money on the hardware. They sell it at a loss, hoping that you'll go buy the headset, you'll go buy the controller, you'll go buy the memory unit, and then you'll buy several games online and hit that download button. I just don't see the long term hardware plan. Now, before anybody jumps me, I see the next generation. I don't see what comes after that.
Yeah, we're kind of repeating ourselves, but I do. If I had to make some bold predictions and put on my tinfoil hat, my soothsayer robe, and get in my wizardry ideas, I think Microsoft's investing in controllers. They can still make those, just like they used to make keyboards and mice back in the day, that pair well with Windows PCs. Like that's the idea is that you're going to go out and get a Surface Pro 10 or 11, even if it's on ARM or whatnot, and you pair that with a controller, and you'll have the specs enough to play these games. Uh, for those who don't know some of the development cycles in gaming, they're mostly started off built on PCs, and then they are developed down onto the specific specs of a console. So, consoles are built obviously a lot different than PCs, but in order to get the high frame rates and get, kind of get it knocked out of the park to begin with, all of the coding and development, all of the assets and whatnot, these are all built on a PC. Microsoft has the operating system that runs this stuff to build that's already built on a PC. If they start saying from now on, PC is the one of the best places to play, everyone already has one. Some of the games that we're releasing are, great for the specs that are already there. All you need if you're a console person is a controller, or a controller, kind of like what they did with Stadia, where it's you just turn on your TV and your TV has enough specs to run the games that we're putting on there. We do most of the processing in the cloud for you already. You just need to make sure that this controller, just like for all Stadia's faults, did great with the latency. They had some kind
They
of
did.
Bluetooth and some kind of they had a bit of processing power in the controller to reduce that latency. Microsoft can do the same thing with the Xbox controller and say, hey, again, you go out and buy your Samsung TV with Xbox enabled. It has enough on-device specs to run part of the game. Microsoft takes the other part of it in Azure, processes all of that in real time, and again, all you needed was the controller. Maybe the controller's a little bit more instead of $70, $60, $70. It's a little bit more than that. But they're not building a console at this point. And they're getting all that overhead for just the game itself, having you subscribe to it every month versus the $70 once a year, wherever, however much it costs you for Call of Duty or whatnot. I believe these are the strategies they're kind of putting into place. And this is how they're going to kind of up in Sony, which Sony does, bank on you buying their hardware. And at this point, they can say, you know what, Sony, you and I can both exist in the same gaming space. You have your console, we put games on that console. If people want to play it on that console, that's great for them. They're still paying for either the subscription or the game from us. We'll make our money back that way versus we made this console. It cost us, $6 to $8 billion of R&D, and we're hoping to make it back if people buy it from some other third party distributor, some other third party, Activision's making, their percentage on it. And we have to somehow see if we can make a smaller percentage because it's made on our console. We bought the whole shop. The game comes through us. We then sell it to you. You have the audience. That's great. I'm glad people are playing on your console, but they're still buying our game. They're still subscribing to our service in order to play the game. Everyone wins. And again, this is what a lot of people were fearing when Microsoft said they're going to start releasing their exclusives on it, because exclusive is the only way that tie people to consoles specifically. Like you're not going to get Mario on PlayStation. You're not going to get Mario or Link or Legend of Zelda on Xbox, and that's why the Switches are selling like hotcakes. So at the end of the day, Microsoft's waving their hand very slowly, saying, we're going here, everybody. There are several options currently free to game. They are not taking anything away. There's nothing to deride Microsoft for, but there will be different options in the future, and hopefully more more accessibility for everybody at the end of the day. I don't know many people that can afford two $400 to $500 gaming systems in order to play all the games. But there are people who can afford one and perhaps $10 a month to play everything. And I think that's a win for everybody at the end of the day.
Totally agree, and I'm gonna have to let a opinion go here for just a minute because I have always in some of our previous pods have mentioned, what about the people that don't have broadband? When we went from disc to digital
That's a very real
downloads, and
concern. Yeah.
you know, I think that will always be a concern, but unfortunately, I think by the time Microsoft is ready to pull the trigger on these decisions, there's always going to be, unfortunately, and I say that again, a group of people that gets left out.
But I mean, to your point though, this is still a win for everybody because what
Yeah.
they're doing is they're printing those games still in a CD that can be used in an optical drive. The games are just coming from Microsoft, so the initial payment goes to Microsoft. They don't need to run the cloud. They can say, you know what, Call of Duty is now a Microsoft game. 70% of whatever you purchased on. So if it's $60, $70 for that game, we get 70, 80% of that. Sony will get whatever they get from it, from licensing it from us or from Ubisoft through us or whatnot. And we get a percentage of that as well. But the gamer at the end of the day has paid both Microsoft and because they're playing it on PlayStation as a hard coded thing, gets the experience. I think at the end of the day, that is, they're both businesses. They both need to make money. This is the best way for Microsoft to make money than saying, hey, we hope you buy our console. If you already bought a PlayStation, it's kind of a tough thing. And then we lose out on that because we're not the console you chose. You chose PlayStation and you chose Activision. There's no Microsoft at all in that pie. Now it's you chose PlayStation and you chose Activision, which is Microsoft. You've still chosen us at the end of the day, even if you don't have broadband. Now, to your point, hopefully, here in the US, we get our act together and we expand the access to broadband so that Microsoft can, people, not even Microsoft, but people can experience cloud gaming, the accessibility at which you don't necessarily need to go out and buy a console in general. You can say, you know what, I can only afford the family laptop, the family PC, or a smartphone and, a TV or whatever. But I do like gaming. I wish I could game and we have decent, broadband. I just don't have enough money to do broadband, console, plus individual games and any of the auxiliary things that come with gaming. Now Microsoft's saying you don't need most of that. You just need broadband and whatever the cost of the subscription is to play these games, to play lots of games too, instead of just saying I got to save my life, my monthly salary for this one game. I can play 5 games in a month because I pay the half that price for this subscription.
I also see a place of a just to make this easy for folks. I see two things happening. One you brought up already, and we've discussed. I think you'll see I'm going to give it a name here. You'll see an Xbox app on your streaming platform. I also think you will see just because what comes to my mind is parents, such as you have younger children, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old that still need mom and dad to go in there and help them set their devices up when they get them. I see a place where maybe Microsoft doesn't make this device, but there is a Xbox streaming stick. I'm just gonna, or something that parents can go buy, plug into the kid's bedroom TV or monitor or whatever, or even a PC if it's, set up that way. You plug it in, you launch it, you get access to the Xbox store, which kind of plays into what they're wanting to do with having a store. Um, you get access to everything Xbox. You tap what you want to play and you play. Mom and dad pay the subscription. Mom and dad don't have to worry about it. They know what it's budgeted into each month. And because I'm mid 40s and I know Kareem is right behind me, we started when games were 39.99, 49.99, 59.99. Now some of them are 69, and every once in a while I've seen 79.99 in there. If you want any of the premium add-ons, it's pushing $100 or more. So this will, in the end, I think, make things more affordable, which does what Microsoft wants to do, increases the user base, which in turn does what, folks? Increases what goes in the bank account because they have now reached more people that can now afford for little Johnny and little Susie to get a streaming stick, plug it into their TV, have the controller, play the game. Easy for the parents, affordable, does what Microsoft wants to do.
Yeah, to your point, Microsoft may, we've talked about it for the last, I don't know, 9, 10 years about a Xbox streaming stick, which would make total sense. And maybe Microsoft does make it. Maybe they can get a really nice looking one out of the Surface division. But I think to your point and to what Microsoft does well, they just have to basically set the minimum specs and parameters, and things like a Roku or Chromecast to a certain extent, which has the app, uh, can build in the minimum gigabytes of RAM that's necessary if you need an auxiliary like power supply, to like connect it to. I think like they did with the Chromecast Ultra or something like that. I think you had to have like a separate power source. Maybe those are the things. Maybe we'll just start seeing these companies crop up out of nowhere. They might be no name brands. Maybe they're even extensions of the TV companies themselves. Vizio makes a power, gaming stick. All they needed was the software. Now, this is to this point. Microsoft needs to fix this, and they need to fix it soon. The same software that they're using for like the NVIDIA Shield or the Lenovo Legion Go or any of these handheld devices, if they can get that same exact software, that seems, and this is what makes Netflix really nice, is that it's the same UI experience across every device, which makes it, you know, uh, accessible to everybody. Everyone knows how to, rummage through Netflix and get to whatever they need to get to. That's what Microsoft needs to do with this Xbox app eventually, is get that software nailed down on these handheld devices while they're still out there, port that experience over to these streaming sticks, and then just say, hey, whoever wants to make a streaming stick that runs the new Xbox app with all the games, stuff like that, here are the minimum specs. Have at it, and have all these companies either start bundling with their TVs. Hey, you pay $1,000 for the new Sony TV, and it comes with this Xbox stick. All the parents have to do at that point is go out, like you said, buy a controller. You don't need necessarily a full console. You don't need to pay $500. Same thing for Roku. Roku's like, you know what? We want to see our sales increase a little bit. We'll start putting the Xbox app on our devices. Same thing for Chromecast or whatever. If they decide, it comes with Netflix, it comes with YouTube, and it comes with the Xbox app. Like this is how Microsoft expands gaming access, gets more people to subscribe to their services, gets people to kind of move away from that. I need a hardware, I need a console, I need to have these things, I need to have a gaming chair. Like you don't need any all of that. Same thing for a PC. If your PC can't run it specifically, like you have a Windows 10 device for some reason, not some reason, but if you have a Windows 10 device, you can go out and buy this, get the streaming stick, have it as a USB-C or USB-A, connect it into your PC, and boom, now you've got yourself a console grade uh, gaming experience. Get the controller as well. So I'm all for it. Again, Microsoft's not altruistic in this. This isn't going to be easy either. There are going to be a lot of bumps in the road. There are going to be probably times where gamers are going to feel unsatisfied or disapprove of some of the decisions they're making. But I believe the ultimate feature at the end of the day is to be like Netflix, be that app on every screen, and have access to gaming anytime you need to, wherever you need to. Now, the quality of games, that's a conversation for another day. Because we know Microsoft, we fortunately bought Activision, and they have Bethesda, who seem to be doing great work. So as long as they can keep acquiring good studios and bring them into the fold, hopefully the level of game stays as high as they are. But like I said, that's another conversation for another day. I think we can wrap this up. I think we've beaten this horse as dead as it can get. Where can people find you at if they want to beat another horse with you on the whole
Well,
conversation?
we can beat on another horse on this conversation or any other tech related conversation in most cases. I am on Threads, David PAJ1978, and I'm also still on Twitter, X, David PAJ1978. I visit both about the same, check in 2 or 3 times a day, scroll the headlines, get involved in a little chatter, so feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to interact with any of you.
Yeah, you can find me at Mindhead1 on Twitter, Kareem Anderson on Threads or Instagram. If you want to talk about movies, TV shows, comics, things that are unrelated to tech in general, you just want to take a break from it all, you can reach out to me there on any of those platforms. I'd love to discuss all of that. If you want to talk about tech in general, obviously I'm up for that as well. But I also recommend people go visit our website.
Yes.
We're fortunate enough to get our one of our friends back to help write for us, Arif, who's a great writer. You guys might have known him from on Microsoft and over at XDA. He's helping out the website a bit. So if you love his writing, if you love his style, his the way he storytells, go check out our site to get some more of that stuff. He's got a review up, which I think is pretty great. If you are in the shopping mode for I believe it's a Lenovo X1 Fold, fifth, 13th, I don't know, one of the latest generations. Go check that out. Other than that, we want to thank you guys for hanging out with us for another week.
Yes.
This is one of our shorter podcasts, so hopefully you guys can get out and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Be safe.
See you guys next week. Have a good weekend.